So I'd originally titled this talk of Caucasus, cows and Chacha, just because I really wanted to talk about all of those things. And it's sort of a tale of really more of a holiday to Georgia, to the mountains of Georgia. So it's really a bit of a mix of culture, free riding and touring. And we did even take one skier with us, so it wasn't 100% split boarders. I don't know if everybody knows what is splitboarding. I've had a few comments out there in the backcountry. What the heck is that thing anyway? But perhaps since COVID, people are a little bit more aware of what it is. But basically, it's a snowboard that splits into two pieces for the way up, and then rejoins into its surf form for the down as a snowboard. You'll see in the photo on the right that I actually use Alpine touring hard boots, which are in fact slightly modified. But this actually places me in a bit of a minority amongst the splitboarding community, although there is more and more acceptance. It used to be that nobody liked us, and now we're getting a bit more accepted by people. So I guess the question, why Georgia in the first place? I'm not actually sure how I originally came upon this, but I found a video on the internet one evening. And this is basically the thing that inspired me to organize the trip. It was part of the Salomon TV channel. It's still up there, as you'll see. And there were just certain moments that stood out in this dream trip that a lucky watcher had booked with a couple of ski pros that just captured my imagination immediately. So we're going to watch a few of the bits together, and hopefully the sound will work. We did test this.
This is like, thank you so much.
Why Georgia?
I saw some footage earlier in the year of some skiers out there, and I looked at some pictures, and I'm like, there looks like there's some really good skiing out there. I thought Georgia would just be awesome. So
I just saw that and I was like, wow, look at all of those things. And the first thing that stood out for me were the towers. The towers look like nothing I'd ever really seen before.
Georgia sits at the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. It's exotic. I don't know anyone personally that's ever been to Georgia. To me, it was easily one of the best places I could pick.
And then there's the skiing. I mean, I used to queue up for the first bin in Chamonix, sort of an hour and a half before it even opened. But you see this and there's nobody else there, and it blows your mind.
Was legit. Like, that was the dream trip.
Yeah, Zebo, that was sick, bud. Yeah, buddy, rip it.
It wasn't me doing backflips. The snow looked amazing as well. After all of the dry years in Chamonix, everything being all tracked out, this place looked like 100% snow sure.
Town. Rolled up to the ski hill, and there was like a solid 2 feet. It was deep, it was heavy, and it felt just like home.
Everything looks amazing about it. So there's this kind of scene you'll see in a second where it's all the snow, it's the terrain, and they've got the towers and everything. I was like, wow, this looks amazing.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, buddy, rip it. Oh, boy. That was nice. Look at this place. Woo! What a beauty. Thanks, Zebo.
So you'll see that road again later in the talk. So where is Georgia exactly? Well, as Zebo mentions, it's over on the east of the Black Sea. It's bordered to the north by the Russian Federation, and then to the south by Turkey, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. 20% of what's internationally recognized Georgian territory is under Russian military occupation, which also includes some interesting ski terrain. As you can see, quite a substantial part of the country is elevated. The main mountain chain is this one at the top here. It's the Greater Caucasus, which includes Mount Elbrus. And if we're being relatively generalistic, it's the watershed of what divides Europe and Asia. To the south, you have the Lesser Caucasus, and within the Caucasus ranges, there are 13 peaks that are actually higher than Mont Blanc. So it's a fairly hefty mountain range indeed. So where can you go? What are your options if you're planning a trip to Georgia? So this map is courtesy of Powder Hounds. This is the map of Georgia. When we went in 2020, there were only really sort of 4 areas I would have said were worthy of consideration. And there were constraints in that we were all working and we had to fit into sort of the norms of vacation time. So we had about 2 weeks. So up here you have, just near the border, you have Svaneti, the region, which is where the towers and the cows are. So that was clearly going to be on the list. And within Svaneti, you have obviously the terrain, but you have 2 resorts. You have Hatzvali near the town, and you have Tetnudi over here. Tetnudi goes pretty high. It's from 3,160 meters down to 2,265, so about 900 vertical meters difference. Hatzvali is a little smaller, 2,348 down to 1,868 meters, so it's only around 500 meters difference. Over a little bit to the side here, you have Russia. At a time, this was very undeveloped. Trips were really mostly about camping and overnight snow caves kind of halfway up giant couloirs. A guy called Sergei Potapenko, a very sadly deceased splitboarder, was largely responsible for breaking this area with his company Russia Freeride. I've included a link at the end of the presentation, as I can guess this might be an area that you guys might be looking into as a sort of a first option. I'd hasten to add as well, there's a little bit more infrastructure there now. I think they've improved what you can actually do in terms of staying. You don't have to sleep in snow caves anymore. Down here in the Lesser Caucasus, you have 2 cat skiing areas. Bakmaro was the place that was in operation, or still is in operation, but we looked at. There was a Swiss cat skiing project, which they plan to have transferred perhaps to local hands, and a creaky lodge to stay in. I believe that this is also expanded, and there's another location at Ajara, which is quite nearby. Unfortunately, it used to be very reasonable value. The prices have sadly gone up. And then over here, just past Tbilisi, which is the capital and where we flew into, there's a resort called Gdari, just north of it in the Greater Caucasus chain. This is the most developed resort with what I would call respectable terrain. And down here in the south, in the Lesser Caucasus, there are a couple of more family-orientated resorts, which are relatively tame, but I believe have some sorts of mellow touring possibilities. If the name Gdari sounds familiar, you may actually remember this video.
Блядь, пидорасы, блядь, что вы делаете? Я хуею. Сука! Прыгайте!
Probably enough of that. This was a ski lift in Gdari that ran backwards through, eventually it was discovered, totally human error. So regardless of the sort of dangers to self-excluded, given the time constraints we have for our trip, we still decided to go to Gdari and split between Gdari and Mestia, the center of the Svaneti area that you saw, as there was a reasonable choice of accommodation and guiding. Based on the information we had at the time, we decided to go in late January, just after the Russian New Year, because we thought it would be quieter. A lot of Russians were obviously going to Georgia at the time, and should have been reasonably filled out with snow, although, as you're going to see, this didn't exactly work out as we planned. We can look at the sort of the snowgrass for Gdari, and we can compare it to Mestia. And you can see that January doesn't look too bad, but actually the TLDR version is that March is probably a better time to go. And it's almost certainly a better time for touring. And this was reinforced by comments from the guide from Mestia. So I would say definitely peak season, if you look at the kind of average snowfall or the average temperatures, March would be a good time to consider going. So sadly, this isn't exactly a story of glorious Instagram-like runs like the one you saw in the video. Really more of an encouragement to go and try the country for yourselves and perhaps see if you have a little bit better luck than we did. So about our trip, as I said, it's not really what you would call an expedition. It's more of a holiday, although to a slightly wilder destination. We planned around 6 days on the mountain plus travel to Georgia and within Georgia, so around 10 days in all, and it was always intended to be a mix of culture, free riding and touring. After some research, we decided to use an agent in Georgia to sort things out, as even just a few years ago, it was a lot harder to find things online in English, or in fact at all really. I've added the details to the end of the presentation and also a link to the one of the promo videos, which again, it's quite exciting. You might sort of be quite excited to go to Georgia. We went in 2020 and we arrived back just as COVID was starting to kick in. So had in fact we planned for March, it's quite likely we wouldn't have made it there at all. I remember sitting in the airport on the way back, sort of a ring of trolleys circled around us like settlers in the Wild West, kind of nervously looking at coughing people and trying to keep our distance. And there's a lot of people who are coughing in Georgia for some reason, so they all smoke a lot, so that's probably it. So anyway, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves somewhat. The trip started a lot better when passport control handed me a bottle of wine along with my passport stamp, which I thought boded fairly well for Georgian hospitality. I was pretty tired at the time and I didn't read the label, but after some disco nap, it actually tells you you need to bring a much bigger pair of trousers to Georgia, which is good advice, I think. When we arrived in Kadari, so we were staying at a place called Happy Yeti. It's just a hostel. We did everything on a reasonable budget sort of basis. And it's right at the bottom of the resort. The road continues up and away here, past Kadari. And then you have the rest of the resort. You have New Gadari and Gadari itself, which is sort of continues up. But it's not very far to walk if you're sort of following the Yeti's footprints there. However, it was made a lot easier to walk up because there was a totally appalling lack of snow, as you can see. This photograph here on the top left, that's a piste in January in Georgia, relatively high up. And despite watching the snow forecast with a steely eye for weeks, it had absolutely no effect whatsoever, and Georgia was experiencing a pretty poor year for snow, in all honesty. This is the area around the hostel. As you can see, it looks like, I don't know, the end of April or something like this. It was a bit upsetting, to be honest. And it was pretty clear we weren't going to be doing any free riding off the resort. But as you can see, perhaps in the background here, the higher slopes did have some cover. So we decided first to have some lunch and then plan for touring. So after our first lunch, I could definitely say that the wine label was right, and it's a very good job. The ski pants are stretchy, but I'll talk more about the food later. I'm sure some people might be interested in it. I should also say, in researching this talk, it seems they had a fairly bad season this year as well. Either no snow or terrible instability, extreme avalanche risk in many, many, many places. So, you know, if you go, fingers crossed for you. So we went touring on a mountain called Dere Ena. This is it. Its name means, well, I'm not quite sure what it means exactly. We had a few translations: mother of alphabet, perhaps mother language, or mother tongue. Though for all of those reasons, I still don't know why the mountain is called that. But there you go. That's what it's called. This is looking back from part way up. This shows the opposite side of the terrain. Mostly because there's a sort of free ride routes are quite popular from the resorts. So the top of the list system drops you up here on the sort of top right hand part of the picture. Although by all accounts, this is actually quite prone to sliding, and even in January, I don't think anyone had really ridden it. And you definitely need to get a ride back from the road that I mentioned previously, but just to stay forever there. Throughout this sort of talk and this section, I'm going to try and show the possibilities of the terrain if they have snow and stability, so you can see the potential. Let's have a look. Oops. So this is about halfway up. This is my friend Anders, a fellow splitboarder. He's from Sweden, but he used to live in the Pyrenees. And then I moved here and he moved away. I don't know if that's any sort of coincidence. As you can see behind him, the mountain looks absolutely fantastic. If you have any snow or anything that's worth skiing. The further up we got, the sort of, you can see the wind and the sun have cleared a lot of the snow off. And it wasn't until we sort of got even a bit further up that we had any sort of cover of snow left. This skin track is firmly welded in. It's not as good as it looks. Basically, that's like being in a sort of an iron motorway, if you like. But at least there aren't a lot of lines up there. That was, I guess, one thing you could say. So here I'm trying to sort of show the state of the snow. As you can see, it's kind of wind blown and pretty crusty. And this was basically the best that they could find for us. We talked to the guiding company, and they said this was the best thing that they could basically take us to, and wasn't like super enthusiastic for the fact we were supposed to be spending half a week there. We climbed up to this col here that you can see in the middle of the picture. This is just at the top of the ridgeline. But in Georgia, you can keep going up a long way. I'd say we were about halfway up the possible elevation, and we did around, I guess, 900 meters of vertical. So yeah, you could easily have kept going if you'd wanted to, or if there was any snow to actually come back down again. It was amazing up there, though. I would say that the silence was utterly energizing in a way that I don't think I've really ever experienced anywhere I've been in Europe. Just felt so remote and wild, and for that it was worth walking up there. These are our two guides, Basti and Nikita, one splitboarder and one skier. We went with a group. We didn't have a private group for this one because it was our first day and it was cheaper to obviously go with a mixed group. This is not a close-up of Anders, even though he's very handsome. This again is just to show more of the terrain that we were looking across to, and as you can see, it's absolutely magnificent. Fantastic pitches available. If you want to get gnarly, there's some really high stuff you can do. Lots of steep and narrow couloir. Looks absolutely fantastic, but as you can see, very, very sparse in terms of snow cover. This again is looking back there, Anna, and again, not an excuse to show some sort of big trucks which kind of ply the country, but more the state of the snow cover. And we're at, really quite high up at this point. So in the end, the mountains are calling, and we decided to pack everything and leave after one day, effectively. This was our mode of transport around Georgia. It's the jacked up Mitsubishi Delicia 4x4, and you see them absolutely everywhere. Super popular vehicle. You also see a lot of old work vehicles from Germany, but as they don't bother to repaint them, it was initially quite surprising to see a plumber from Munich passing by, but then we realized there were way too many German vehicles to be actually the Germans coming to do work in Georgia. So we followed basically the rivers, the grading rivers down to the plain from the north to the south, and we traversed nearly all the way to the Black Sea, all the time following the ridge of the Greater Caucasus. You could see it sort of peeking out, and we'd see these fantastic looking castles and churches and things along the way, and always the ridge line is kind of within sight. And we felt like, I think we never were more than around 150 kilometers geographically from our final destination. And we almost made it to the Black Sea. In fact, I'm not even sure if we didn't end up in a town on the Black Sea for dinner, where we had another very badly judged portion control catastrophe, but we never got any closer to our destination either. Dave was our driver. He was a legend. He drove us 11 hours, I think it took in the end. Whatever Google says here, 9 hours, something, complete lie. As was the agent who told us around 7 hours. It took a long time. He was exceptional at swerving cows. These are cows on the main motorway. And this picture at the bottom was taken shortly before he actually did lose control of the bus in a corner late at night, and we did a rather terrifying 360 in the bus. But as we didn't end up in the ravine that was below us, it was all good, and no one sort of was too stressed about it, it seems. So we arrived in Svaneti, the land of the Svans. Mestia is remote, but it's been inhabited for centuries, and life there must have been unbelievably hard back in the day. It was still very culturally rich. We found that we went to the Museum of Ethnography while we were staying there one evening after being out, and it's an absolute must go. You can see all these fantastic artifacts. A lot of them are religious, but not all. There's lots of interesting things from Svan life that you can see. And in the background, you see one of the towers that I was so excited about in the video, and remain fairly excited about. Why are the towers everywhere? We had a theory that they were initially built by husbands to escape the wife and kids, or they made the ultimate man cave. But then we found out that wasn't actually true. Houses were basically way too scattered in the valley to protect as a village, so you might put a wall around it. And in addition, it transpired that the Svans also practiced blood feuds, so you weren't even safe from your neighbours. So if you had built a wall around the village, that wouldn't protect you from someone who had a blood feud with you for some reason or another. The towers are absolutely stunning. I mean, you see the pictures, you see the videos, you can see them all over the internet, but until you see them, they really are amazing. And I took lots of pictures of towers while I was in Svaneti, as you'll see. A word on the guiding. So there is a guide office in Svaneti. It's relatively new. When we visited, I would say that the level of guiding is not exactly the standard you would expect if you used to, for example, French or Swiss standards. And I'm not saying this just because our guide was really, really down on snowboarders, but he did hang one up as a warning to other snowboarders outside. The guides felt a lot more like guys who know where to go and show you around the mountain than a mountain professional that you could rely on. You don't sort of get that feeling of calm competence. Basically, one night would be getting stinking drunk, and our guide forgot to bring his skins until we got to the trailheads, and that kind of messed up our day quite badly. And I kind of hope that things have improved. They were definitely receiving further training from France. In fact, they were training in New Cadre when we were there. So I really do imagine things will improve. And this sort of, hopefully the attitude will be a bit tempered, perhaps due to their kind of bloody history in general. Georgians can come across as a little bit inflexible. So I think there's hope, and I'm sure they're trying to build something that's good out there. So touring, we did 2 days, I think, of touring. So we did 3 in total, and about 3 days of free riding. The first day we went to what I think is Svipy. It had another strange name, or at least the area we were targeting, which is the Valley of the Vibrating Bushes. And as you'll see, they seem to vibrate the focus of my camera out. I couldn't take a single picture in focus up there for some strange and mysterious reason. So we had to take kind of a 4x4 trip out to nearly the middle of nowhere, it seemed. And we did some hiking through the woods. And then we had some jibbing, ski touring style, across some streams. And then we finally cleared the tree line, and it started to snow. And there was some pretty solid powder there already. And then, we had basically just started to snow a lot. This was fairly near where we topped out. I think this might have been the last photograph I took. It feels a bit like sort of one of the Admonson photographs or something like that, sort of on an old plate film. But all the photographs came out like this. So the brushes clearly vibrated my camera, as I said. But we couldn't get any further up. So I think we managed around just over 1,000 meters of vertical that day. And there was still plenty above us, but we just couldn't see, very far in front of us anymore. Coming down was a little bit messy. The trees are relatively tight, I would say, around here. So we still managed to make it down. And there were some very cute cows at the bottom. We started to award marks for the cows, and we gave these around 8 out of 10 in the cow beauty competition. So they were pretty cute, in my opinion. The second tour we did was Lechty. This was a little bit shorter. This was cut short by the skins forgetting incident. The hike started super well. We had these beautiful towers and sort of set off, and it started to snow again. And the snow got deeper and deeper, great powder, but our guide had a chronic hangover. And again, we got kind of topped out by bad weather just after this hut. I think we managed just literally over 600 meters before it was a crazy blizzard, and there was no way we were going to go any further. The cows they're our friends, one of our skiers, and my wife's splitboarder. The cows are also very cute here, but this one we only gave 7 out of 10 to, so I'm afraid no. But when it snows, it really snows. The night before we went to Hat's Valley, it was very romantic. We had a village-wide blackout. So this is us eating our dinner in front of the fire with headlights and a couple of candles. Georgian families are very large, and we think this might be the reason. There seemed to be quite a lot of blackouts. So it was both a device-free day and a heating-free night. We went out when the power came back on, and as you can see, it was snowing pretty hard. The snow really did come down in earnest, and I haven't experienced snow like this, I would say, since Japan. The snow was amazing. It was cold as hell though. So it made sense to go to Hat's Valley, which is the tree-lined resort relatively near the village. We also found out what happens when you have a power cut and you're on the chairlift and it runs on backup generator. We were lucky to be relatively near the top, and it took us 20 minutes to get off the lift. You can imagine taking a very long chairlift at this speed in absolutely freezing temperatures. We'd gone inside, of course there was no sort of food or hot drinks to be had, but those poor guys were stuck on the chairlift for a very, very long time. I mentioned the road that we saw in the video. This was it. We got to see the road. The resort's a little way above the village, and so you need to drive, basically get a lift or get a bus. Or if you just want to save money, you can just ski down and bases be darned effectively. We visited Tetnildi, which is the other resort I mentioned. This is quite a bit further from Mestia and has no accommodation there at all. So you really need to get a ride. If you're very lucky, you can get on one of the coolest buses I've ever seen. I thought this was amazing. And I also spotted these sort of ghetto snow chains in the car park, which I thought were also kind of great improvisation, and probably people should take a note of the way they're arranged in case they ever need to jury with one of these when they're out and about. The first day we were there, we were mostly orientating ourselves to the resort. You can see how, again, absolutely incredible terrain is. So many places you could consider to tour and then ride. Basically, unfortunately, we were eyeing this up from the first day and sort of making plans, and then the last day, again, the visibility was utterly diabolical, and the Abbey risk was like 4+, and that kind of really just kept us riding in the sort of slack country within the resort and out of the back country. It was just way too dangerous to go out. We did get to see Tetnildi, which 4,858 meters is just a bit higher than Mont Blanc. It made a brief appearance here. And as I said, there are 13 peaks in the Caucasus which are higher than Mont Blanc, so it's a very impressive mountain range. So on the last day, we had time for a walk around Mestia, not because we wanted to take more pictures of towers, but we'd agreed with our driver when he should turn up, and he told us when he wanted to turn up. After some negotiation, we'd agreed a time, and then he just turned up exactly when he wanted to, which is another good example of Georgian negotiation style. I would add that the village has quite a lot of places to stay, to eat and to drink, but not much in the way of equipment shops. There's really just a couple of repair places, one of which, as you know, hates snowboards. So if you're looking to replace anything, or you can't find anywhere, I imagine that may change. For Gadari, I'm not sure if I could. I didn't see much of the resort basically to make any sort of judgment about what infrastructure there is in terms of can I repair something, can I buy something new. we only had lunch by the kind of the muddy piece, and then we ate at Happy Yeti for the remaining 2 meals that we were there, basically. So these are some of the other pictures. It was a beautiful blue day, blue sky day, as you can see. Some of the wonderful towers that people still live in Mestia. Animals in the street. You know, it's really everything that I kind of hoped it would be in terms of when I saw the video. And so I can't really say that Mestia didn't fail to deliver. It was a fantastic sort of place to visit. The weather finally cleared, as you saw on our last day. And this is what we could have won. This is the view literally from outside of where we were staying. It's absolutely staggering. The mountains have been above us the whole time. We hadn't seen them, but this just shows the kind of terrain that was surrounding us and we've been playing on the sides of. It's absolutely mind-boggling, in my opinion. As we drove back to Tbilisi, we basically weren't going to get to see Tbilisi because of the aforementioned driver discussion, but again, you could see this terrain, which was just absolutely fantastic, and you know, it's really calling back to me. As even as I look at it now, it says, you know, come back, riders, come back. There's so much out here. This one with the dog, I think this is where we actually where we'd taken that short tour. This was where we started. So you can see up above us, we could have gone way, 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 way further up and had an amazing kind of tour. Had the weather been much better, but it wasn't to be, unfortunately for us. Again, another fantastic mountain in the region. You know, this whole fantastic ridge looks amazing. Lots of sort of increasing steepness. So much to consider. I've added this sort of last picture because it's really a reminder that Russia has annexed parts of Georgia. On the other side of this dam is one part that Russia has annexed. One of the guys in the van was on the way back, he was a tour guide and a tourism student. He was very keen to show us. We made a bit of a detour to see this and for us to tell people about, you know, that Russia is illegally occupying Georgia. People don't really talk about it, especially recent, but anyway, there you go. I mentioned I would speak about the food. People often ask, well, you know, am I going to enjoy the food? And like, will I go hungry? And I guess it kind of depends on your diet. You should never ask in Georgia, how big is the portion? Because they normally say, it's not so big. This is what happened the first time they said, not so big. We got this enormous cheese bread. This is for one person. Sometimes the cheese even comes with like eggs on top. Another enormous sort of one person portion. These things here look like tiny little dim sum that you get in a Chinese restaurant on the menu, and they brought 2 plates of them, along with the other 2 main courses that we'd accidentally ordered. So, as I said, you tend to get quite full. Mostly, if you like things that are kind of pickled and have anything you can add carbs to, these are very popular dishes in Georgia. But we certainly didn't go hungry. This isn't from Georgia. I added this one because I was so excited to see fresh fruit. I took a photograph of it when I got home. We didn't see, to be honest, a lot of fresh fruit in Georgia. We did drink quite a lot of Georgian wine, which is actually pretty good. They've been making wine in Georgia for a very, very long time, and it's well worth trying different types out, and we certainly did. They also have something called glint wine, which is a bit like Van Scho, and they also have something called Chacha, which is a bit like napalm. This guy on the second picture, he was a bartender. I asked him what flavors, and he goes, "Yeah, we have peach. Other flavor is like wood," and he just taps the bar. And he's like, I thought he was kidding. It genuinely is wood flavored. I think they have like benzene flavored as well, probably, but. The lady here on the shorter lady in the third picture, this is Nana. She was our lovely host for the week, and she's also the Walter White of Mestia and Chacha. She runs one of the big stills in the area. And if you want to see exactly how high octane this homemade Chacha that we were surviving on is, this is how strong it is.
All right. That was better, wasn't it?
Yeah. Probably I can see why the guide was so hungover. So, oops. I don't know if anyone has any questions, but before, sometimes people always ask the same question, is like, would I go back? And I think the answer is kind of a resounding yes. I would, but I try and go for longer and have a little bit more flexibility. Going for a short 2-week window didn't work out for us. And I definitely try for the more remote areas as well. Backmara, the cat skiing, and Rasha would be super interesting. But I think being in the country and having a little bit more possibility of moving around in a slower way would have benefited us. But you know, holidays and you can't. And then in sort of preparing the talk, as I mentioned, and looking at the Avalanche Facebook group for Georgia, this season appears to have been extremely unstable. Avalanches left, right, and centre, extremely dangerous, and in a few other places, no snow at all. And given the wheat layer seems to be basal and allegedly up to 1 metre wide, you know, that could basically wreck any sort of trip you have. But does anyone have any questions they would like to ask at all?
Matt, how realistic is it to just sort of travel around there more spontaneously without the use of an agent or with your own vehicle or something like that? Or do you feel it's just too complicated?
I think own vehicle would absolutely be a great way to go. If you had the time to get a decent 4x4 vehicle there, it would make sense. You know, you're otherwise reliant on getting lifts from the guides, which obviously you get charged. Even if you want to go to Hats Valley from Mestia, you'll get charged something. If you go up to Tent Mildy, you'll get charged something. So yeah, I think having your own vehicle would be fine. I'm sure you'd be able to drive it around. The navigation would be relatively simple. There aren't even that many roads. So you know, if you're used to driving on snow. We've even talked about taking our camper van there and sort of parking up in Mestia and doing it that way. So absolutely, I think possible. You can definitely get buses, but given the constraints of time, you know, it might be, if you have a lot more time, you could consider getting buses to Mestia. It's certainly possible, I would think. I can show sort of, you know, I've included a useful links pack. I can send that to you, Kathy, or it's at the back of the presentation if you want to include the links of the agents we used. We used a company called SnowLab. And they were pretty helpful, and they organized everything for us. There's also another company called Wild Guru who we contacted, and they didn't get back to us in any sort of meaningful time, but they're a lot more professional now. I believe they have a bigger presence in Georgia, so maybe they have more staff to respond to emails. At the time it was just like Sergey, I think, doing it all himself. And then, as I mentioned, Rasha Freeride, honorable mention for Sergey Potapenko, and what's going on in Russia. I think also I have like a few sort of, you know, informational links. Avalanche bulletins, there's one for Gadari, and there's a Facebook group, and they're trying to expand coverage to Mestia, but nobody's taken it up yet. There aren't a lot of resources, I would say, in terms of that. You know, you'd have to make, I mean, the Facebook group didn't exist when we went. The avalanche forecasting wasn't there either, so at least a step forward. I can't speak for costs anymore, because obviously with inflation, it's probably gone nuts in Georgia, just like everything else. But when we went, the transfer to Tbilisi to Gadari was $120. And then accommodation was pretty cheap. It was like around $35, I think. And then the transfer all the way from Gadari to Mestia was at $500 US, which I think had space for 6 people in the van. And then we were paying around $30 in Mestia with half board for breakfast and dinner, which we saw was like very hearty. And the guiding there was 200 euros a day, which was cheaper than it was for groups in Gadari, which was 360. Although we joined a group and paid, you know, I think $20, $30 or something I had. Mm-hmm. Beer was around 10 lari. The currency is Georgian lari, gel. So it was about 3 US at the time. And a meal in a restaurant was around 10 US, 30 lari. What else to say? There are other things to do as well. As I mentioned in Mestia, there's the museums, there's other things you can go and see. There are other activities. There's heli skiing in a couple of locations, as well as the cat skiing. Yeah, there's a lot of culture to see as well. Tbilisi looks super interesting. You know, we would have loved to have had some time in Tbilisi, for example, to look at all the stuff and go out there as well.